I think I know which bit's going on the front of this month's video. Hello everyone, and welcome to the January 2019 episode of the Not Quite Enough Yarn podcast. My name is Leslie, and this is a podcast about knitting, crochet, yarn stuff generally, recorded throughout the month and put up at the last weekend of the month, and this is from the south coast of England. Thank you very much for joining me. Whether you're a new viewer or returning, you're very welcome, and I'm glad to have you here. January, the longest month in the calendar. It does feel like a long one. It was a long time since Christmas and all the fun of Vlogmas. But there are things to do and things to make. And I have quite a few finished objects this month. And also there is the craft along, knit along, make along, crochet along, whatever kind of along you want it to be. That's my dog Heidi, for those who don't know her. I'm hosting the along with the lovely Barbara from the Flame and Fibre podcast. I'll put more details about it later, but it's basically a use up from your stash, knit along, crochet along, spin along. So hopefully that's something that will be of interest, because stash and the using of it is a big theme in this podcast. I have 3 cupboards of yarn. I have 2 here, have another one on this side, and I'm trying to get it down to 1 cupboard. It's 2 cupboards. Let's not go crazy. To 2 cupboards. And given that, the name Not Quite Enough Yarn may seem inaccurate, but the way I buy your yarn tends to mean that I have a lot, but not enough for a single project. And for example, in this shot at the moment, you think I'm wearing a red top. This is one that I made last year. Actually, it's 3 different colours because that was what I had the yarn for. So I'll put the details of this top on the notes if anyone's interested. It was a Caron pattern. So that's it. That's this podcast. Again, thanks so much for coming along. Thank you to everyone who comments and likes and subscribes and does all those things. It is very much appreciated. On with the show. Hello, on this bright sunny January day, I have a small but cute finished object for you. I mentioned that I had some baby items to make. I think I've got a wonky camera. Sorry, that was attractive, wasn't it? I mentioned I had some baby items to make. Some friends of mine are due to have a baby at the end of February. And although I saw the dad-to-be yesterday and he was saying, oh no, we don't want clothes from anyone, I'd already had a message from the mum-to-be a few weeks ago now with a photograph of a sort of onesie, all-in-one baby grow type thing. And she asked if she could commission me. I said, well, no, you can't commission me, but I'll make it for you. What colour do you like? And they asked for sort of natural colours. So here we have, I found what I think is the exact pattern. The photos don't exactly match up, but I think it's the exact pattern. And it's this, which is the Sweetest Sleeper by Simply Sycamore. I will put photographs up from the designer as well, so you can see it actually worn by a baby, which is a good thing. And it's really sweet. Very, very quick knit. I made it in 2 evenings. I made the smallest size, the 0 to 3 months. But look at that. Isn't it cute? So the yarn is, I've always pronounced it Jarol. Maybe it's J-roll, I don't know, but it's their Heritage yarn, which is 55% wool, 25% acrylic and 20% nylon. So it feels nice and soft thanks to the wool content, but hopefully will be kind of hard wearing and go through the washing machine for as long as the baby fits into it. I mean, realistically, babies grow very quickly, so yes, it's not going to last for long, but hopefully it will last well while the baby's wearing it. I was a bit worried that it seemed very long. Now, I'll be perfectly honest, as a rule I don't swatch for baby patterns. Because children grow so quickly, I figure it'll either fit now and not later, or not now and fit later, so I tend not to swatch. I was worried this was becoming very long, so I did a quick measurement, and actually my gauge isn't far out. I think it's something like 18 stitches for 4 inches as per the pattern, and I think mine was 18.5 stitches, so I'm not exactly wildly out. And looking at other people's patterns, it is quite a long garment, but will stretch when baby's inside it. So, and also the dad's quite tall, so yeah, I think that's okay. So you can see it's got little feet. It's like doing little socks on the end. Really sweet. Now, I'll be perfectly honest. Had the garment been my choice, I probably wouldn't have gone for this pattern. Not there's anything wrong with it. To me, it's that gauge. It's very loose. It's 5mm needles. Excuse me, sorry. I'm trying to get rid of the squeak still. It's 5mm needles for a double knitting weight yarn. And that's 2 sizes larger than I would expect to use. And for a baby item, I tend to go towards snuggly. So a denser fabric to keep them nice and warm. But I am following the request of the mum-to-be, so if that's what she'd like, delighted to make it for her. Really, I found it a really easy pattern to follow. The designer has put notes on saying that they consider it an advanced because it's working in the round and it has some sort of bits and pieces like putting stitches on a holder to go back to later. But if it's, so I can understand that if it's the first time you've done these things, that can feel a bit daunting. But the pattern is incredibly clearly written. It is row by row, exactly what you need to do, how many stitches you'll have at the end of each round. So although they consider it an advanced pattern, I would say it's actually very good for a kind of beginner stroke intermediate knitter who's perhaps trying garments, even small ones, for the first time, because the clarity is excellent and you can track exactly where you're supposed to be. So I would suggest it from that point of view. It is a page pattern. Like I say, if you're trying these techniques for the first time, it is very, very clear on what you need to do round by round by round. So that's really kind of all I have to say. It used about 160 metres of the yarn. And yeah, I've kind of partly blocked it. I mean, it has a wool content, so I dampened it and rolled it up in a towel rather than try to pin it out because of the acrylic content as well. But it's just kind of lovely and soft. I will drop it off when I visit them, when I visit their house later in the week. And I hope that they like it and that it fits baby when he arrives. We know it's a he, and this is the one where they've said that his name is following kind of natural ideas, natural thoughts. So I'm hoping it's not hillock or mound or something like that. I'm still sticking with Rowan as my suggestion, but they're very creative people, so they'll come up with something completely different, I'm sure. So yes, simply Sycamore's design, and it's the Sweetest sleeper, and this was the 0 to 3 month size. So another very quick finished object. Well, hello, I have another finished object. I know, it's just, I've been so productive. Having said that, this is so quick. I have made a blanket. A large, it's about 43 inches square blanket. Viewers from back in the summer will remember that my lovely sister arrived with loads of yarn. There's quite a bit of it in this cupboard here. and there was a lot of eyelash yarn, 2 full packs and some other bits and pieces. And really very kind of her. She's not a knitter, but she knows that I knit for her and she wanted to reciprocate. So she bought all this yarn, and I saw all this eyelash and I thought, well, I'm not going to make myself a sweater out of that, because I don't know if you remember the Honey Monster from TV, but that would be me, albeit in a different colour, in a fluffy garment. But I immediately thought that would make a great blanket. Now I have a great niece, the lovely little Fern. I say little, she's incredibly tall. She's one of these tall, skinny children. And she likes a blanket. She likes to curl up under a blanket to read a book or to watch TV. And I thought that this would suit her well. So some of this yarn is from Bev, the sort of pink colour. They're actually, I don't know if the camera's going to show it up, but we've got a pink going into another pink, going into more of a purple. And some of the others, this bright pink in the middle and the black. I had some other eyelash yarn in the stash, and I just thought I'd break it up a bit with those colours. So this pattern is hard to tell because of the fluff, but it is a good old-fashioned granny square. And I'm going to push it up really close to the camera so that you can see it is a good old-fashioned granny square. And I chose that. I mean, I've been making granny squares since I was 5. It was the first thing my grandmother ever taught me to crochet. Yeah, just it's kind of a go-to thing, and for that reason I often resist it, because I think, no, I've made lots of those, I don't need to make another one, I want to try something new. But the reason why I chose it in this case is because a granny square is one of the most forgiving things you can crochet. If you have yarns of slightly different weights and thicknesses, it just seems to keep its shape, keep its dimensions, irrespective of what you chuck in it. Now, I've never tried super bulky with lace weight, even I'm not that daft, but I knew that although I had slightly different yarns here, albeit all eyelash, they were slightly different thicknesses, I felt that the granny would be the forgiving enterprise. Also, being a granny square, it's really quick. I made this in about a week, so very, very quick. Yeah, so it's various eyelash yarns. There's Crafts, I've got this written down, Crafts Feather, which is this pink with yellow in the middle, and this slightly different pink where we've got pinks into purples here, Crafts Feather as well, I think. This here, Ruffled Ribbon, or it may be the other way around. So this purple into gold. I kind of got to the point where I thought this is a big enough blanket. I know she's tall, but she is only 7, be 8 in a few weeks. But I thought otherwise I'm going to drown the poor girl. So I finished making it. I have a lot of this outer colour left. I also have some of the other eyelash yarns that my sister gave me. There were smaller quantities of other colours, and some that I had in the stash anyway. A lot of it had been given away with magazines as part of toy kits and things like that. I don't make toys, they don't really look that great when I make them. And so I'd sort of stuck that all to one side, as well as chenille, fluffy, snowflake type yarns, some fake fur. And I am knitting another blanket that is for my great nephew, Fern's little brother. But when I was making this and it was on my legs, I thought, oh, that's nice and warm. I like that. I don't know if Fernie's going to have it. Well, of course she will. She's Fern, she can have whatever she likes. She's my great niece. So this is definitely for her, but I'm using all of my other fake fur, eyelash, fluffy, general novelty type yarns to make a much more scrappy looking blanket. It's still a granny square for me. Now it'll be the same hook size. This was made on a 6.5mm hook size, which I think is US size 10.5 or letter K. So that's the size hook that I used, and I used in total about 840 meters of yarn, something like that. Excuse me. So it made a big blanket for not much meterage, and it's very cozy. Some of this yarn is very soft. Some of the stuff in the middle is a little bit scratchier. Stuff on the edge really soft and lovely. So I'm hoping that Fern will like this. We are hoping to see them in February, and she can have this gift then, because otherwise I've got to take it by train and it might be a bit bulky later in the year, but hopefully she'll have it before then. And I will show you the knitted one when it's done. I'm nearly finished on that. A little bit slower to make because it's knitted, not going for quite as big, and I'm using different yarn, but again it's bulky weight, it's fluffy stuff. It's on 6.5mm needles rather than hook, so I hope to show you that very soon. Cozy. I must give it to Fern. I'm making my own one. I must give this away. I have another finished object, and it's another big fluffy blanket. This is knitted and it is so soft. I've made it for my great nephew. The last blanket was for my great niece. This is for her little brother, and it's another one that may not leave the house this time because hubby wants to steal this one, but we will give them to the children, I promise. I think because it was beginning of the year, and I don't do the whole kind of new year, new you stuff, but there is that sense of wanting to have a bit of a sort out, and I thought I would go through the novelty yarns in my stash. I have a bag full left, and that's currently becoming another granny square, fluffy granny square, which we will keep and possibly fight over if we both like it. That will be much scrappier in appearance. I won't try and sort of do anything remotely sensible with the colours. I'll just put together what I've got and hopefully use up all of the novelty yarns. So that's to come, but this is done, and this is knitted. It's knitted on 6.5mm needles, and it's just a garter stitch blanket. Most of the yarn, so all of the navy blue and the cream colour, are Wendy Eider, and this is a chunky eyelash type yarn, and it is just like knitting a teddy bear. It is absolutely lovely. The other bits that I've got in there are just bits of novelty that were in the stash. So we've got some kind of snowflake type yarn, we've got some eyelash, just bits of some kind of pom-pommy stuff here, just bits of stuff that were in the stash. Most of them have come to me as part of giveaway kits with magazines. One of the magazines I subscribe to regularly gives away kits to make toys, and I'm not a toy maker, so if they have this type of yarn it just tends to sit in the stash. I was using it last year on the twiddle muffs to give a bit of texture, had some left, so it's gone in this blanket and the rest will go in the crochet one that I'm doing for us. So just absolutely soft, gorgeous. My great nephew's mum is one of these people who always feels cold, so if the kids don't want these blankets, I'm sure Emma will, because she likes a warm, cosy blanket. So just garter stitch. I started off with the navy blue. That's the wrong side, sorry. Started off with the navy blue, did a few rows of oddness, used some cream, put some stripes in, used some cream. It then occurred to me that I wanted a border on the sides as well. I said previously that the granny square is so forgiving when you have different thicknesses of yarn. That's not the case with garter stitch, and this was a bit kind of oddly shaped where we had the different textures of yarn. So what I decided to do was rather than just keep knitting up and then pick up down the sides, because that would have involved weighing a ball of yarn and splitting it in half, and my scales were upstairs, I was downstairs. I really couldn't be bothered. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't paint me in a particularly energetic or dynamic light, but that's the way I was feeling at that particular moment. So what I did was I picked up basically 3 sides. So I picked up along the side of the first bit I'd done, all across top, didn't pick up, I just kept them on the needles, knitted across them, and then down the other side, and just basically knitted the 3 sides. And in the top corners, I don't know if you can see the little holes there, I just did yarn overs for increases. So very straightforward. Slight needle change actually, because I was using my Knit Pro / Knit Picks needles. Not Knit Pricks at all, that would be something else entirely. So I was using my Knit Pro / Knit Pick needles, and I had a fixed one that was a 6.5mm one. Wasn't long enough to then do the 3 sides of the square, and I didn't have a 6.5mm interchangeable, so I moved up a needle size to a 7mm, so it just made it a little bit looser. I don't think you'd know if I didn't tell you. So yeah, it's very soft and was very straightforward, quite a quick knit. I think it took me a couple of weeks to do, just odd bits of time when I had them. So I'm looking forward to giving this to young Stanley. I hope he is cosy underneath it. If not, and if his mum's not, I'm definitely having it back. It's so soft. Oh. So that's Wendy Eider for the majority, and yep, if you want a teddy bear feel, it's a good choice. I'd like to talk a little bit about the conversation that's been going on over the last few weeks on social media within the knitting community about race. And you may be thinking, oh great, a white person talking about race, that's just what the world needs. And yeah, you may well be right. I feel underqualified to talk about this stuff, but I'm also conscious that silence can be complicit, and it's a conversation for everyone to have, for us all to be aware of, and no one should be excluded from that conversation. So that's why I'm putting my tuppence worth here, for what it's worth. Well, tuppence, obviously, I've just said that. For those who aren't aware, over the last month there has been a lot of discussion about racism, privilege, representation, all sorts of matters around race, and it's been across social media. It started off with a blog post that then got responded to. There's been a lot of it on Instagram, and it has been fascinating, uncomfortable reading. The experiences that people have gone through, the way that they've been insulted, treated in a dismissive manner, called horrendous names. Assumptions have been made about people based on their skin colour, you know, you can't afford this yarn type of comments. It's just, I want to say unbelievable, but I don't want it to sound like I don't believe people's stories, because I do. What I'm finding hard to believe is that people are so unkind and so horrible to each other, and based on nothing other than skin colour. Oh, it's just... What's also been quite upsetting from a personal point of view, and this is not about me, but I'm just kind of sharing my thoughts, is that I was completely unaware of this. And that's an example of something I didn't even know I had, which was privilege. To me, privilege was always something that very wealthy people had, and it meant they could buy opportunities, and you know, money talks its way into various situations. What I've realised in this last month is that privilege is actually something that I've had all along and had no idea, because I'm white, because I have a name that sounds traditionally English British. Doors have not been closed to me that would be closed to other people who are equally as talented, if not more so, probably more so, but just doors closed for reasons of plain old-fashioned prejudice and racism. And that's another thing I've learnt, actually, the difference between prejudice and racism. I thought they were the same, but I have come to realise that racism is prejudice with power. Now, forgive me if I'm telling you stuff you already knew. It wouldn't surprise me at all if I'm behind the game on this, but I'm also taking the view that if I didn't know this stuff, there may be others who didn't either. So apologies if I'm, you know, if you feel I'm talking down and teaching you stuff you already know. That's really not my intent. And it's opened up a whole kind of series of questions and debates, and there has been a phenomenal amount of stuff online. Where do we begin? I mean, I'm so disappointed that this has been happening to people in the knitting community, and that's kind of daft, really, because there's no real reason why we should expect the knitting community to behave any better than any other part of society. But it usually does. Knitters, as a rule, as a general rule, they are quite giving, quite welcoming, quite opening, and to find this isn't happening, and that the opposite is happening, that they are closed to people, it just makes me so sad. Really, really does. I will put links in the notes for people that are worth having a look at on Instagram, people with a lot of information, and I am incredibly grateful to them, because the ignorance I had around this subject I'm finding quite embarrassing. I mean, that's my problem to deal with. And it's nobody's job to educate me except me. You know, if people are experiencing these things, they're having a tough time enough experiencing this power imbalance, this racism. They shouldn't have to also spend their time educating people like me. But I am extremely grateful to those who have done so, who have put forward observations by other people, who have highlighted things worth reading and looking at, so that we can educate ourselves, because that is so important. And that's one of our ways forward, I think, to accept that this is happening. Accept makes it sound like it's okay. To acknowledge that this is happening. And to educate ourselves, to understand better what people are going through. And not to assume that just because we're having an easy time, everyone else is, because that's absolutely not happening. Now, the positives that have come out of this are the fact that we are having the conversation. And when I say we, I mean the knitting community. Now, that doesn't mean that every single person is interested in this. And a lot depends on folks' own experiences. I was talking with someone who went to school in London. She was one of only two white girls in the class, and she and the other white girl got picked on by the rest of the class. And that was a horrible experience for her, because it was bullying, and no form of bullying is right. And I guess the difference is, and I'm not trying to prescribe her feelings on this, this is her experience, her reaction to it. I guess the difference is that happened to her at school. It didn't also happen to her in shops, bars, walking down the street, generally getting abuse for what she looked like, whereas some of those other classmates may have got that. That doesn't mean that their behaviour was okay, but it perhaps puts it into a bit of context. I don't know, like I say, I'm not trying to prescribe someone else's feelings, because we can only speak from our own experience, but we can open our minds to what it must feel like for others, and give them the opportunity to express those feelings, rather than try and shut them down, minimise what they are feeling. And the debate actually is at times going much wider, because it's not just about people of colour and the lack of representation of people of colour in the knitting community in wider society. it's any group that isn't represented. So people who are differently abled, LGBT people, trans people. There are so many groups of people that are feeling marginalised. That aspect of them, be it their skin colour, their religion, their anything, is one aspect of them. And it doesn't affect their ability to do brioche stitch. And I can understand there is a fear amongst people who have a particular area that they're concerned about, that they may feel the debate is being diluted with this intersectionality of people saying, okay, well, what about any number of people for various reasons? And so I can understand why in some cases people have felt shut out of the inclusivity. Don't necessarily agree with it, I can just understand why it's happening. And that in itself is part of the debate. I like to think some positives have come out of this, that we are having this conversation, that's very important. And also that the profiles of a lot of people of colour who are makers, dyers, designers, very active in the knitting and crafting community, their profile has been raised. Ravelry is doing a lot of good work on this, in just letting people know that folks are there. And it's something I've been thinking about, because YouTube knows that I like knitting and crochet podcasts. It doesn't offer me many from people of colour. So what is YouTube thinking about that? I know YouTube isn't a sentient being, but we can perhaps work the algorithms a bit. And again, a couple of links of some podcasters. And, you know, no one has to watch them because of their ethnicity. Watch them because they're good. Search for them. Get them moving up the rankings on the search engines. These things help. They help all of us, because we are missing out as a community on a lot of talent if it's hidden. And where do we go next? The key thing is educating ourselves. It's reading, it's listening, it's doing our best to understand. I think that's our starting point. It's talking, it's being prepared to face our own discomfort. I have found this month very uncomfortable in a lot of ways. As I said earlier, you know, understanding my own privilege, being unaware of what people are going through. I like to think I'm a fairly kind of open, liberal-minded person, and I was completely unaware of all of these things. And that's not comfortable in itself. But that's how we learn. We learn by getting things wrong. We learn by trying to make things better, by trying to understand what it is that's required rather than assuming we know, and by listening to people. That in itself isn't easy. You can listen to 3 people and they'll want 3 different things. You can listen to 300 people, they want 300 different things. But it's listening, it's having our minds open, it's being aware that other people's experiences are different and may not be quite so comfortable, privileged, easy. The other thing we can do is support makers of colour, designers, dyers. And my initial reaction to this was, oh, that's positive discrimination, and that caused me some moments. But what I've come to realise is it's not positive discrimination, it's just letting people be known, be seen. I had never heard of a lot of people. Gigi Made It is an example. Gigi I hadn't heard of at the beginning of this year, and now I think I love her. She has the most amazing energy about her. Secreta on Instagram, she just keeps going. She keeps telling us what's been going on, keeps sharing, finding and then sharing these stories, these examples, these guides for where to go next. Kalisha, who I've just bought her shawl pattern. I'll put the link. I haven't started making it yet. It's a shawl, a crochet pattern with brioche in it. This is crochet brioche, people. This designer should be on a pedestal. Brioche is how hot a topic in knitting, and she has got a shawl with crochet brioche in it. And I'd never heard of her until the beginning of this month. So I am extremely thankful to the people who've pointed me in the direction, and that's just 3 people. There are so many talented designers, dyers, makers. I think just the last thing I would want to say is this little corner of the internet, this little podcast, is hosted by a white woman. I can't do anything about that. That's who I am. But I hope it is an inclusive space. And everyone who watches, who comments, who interacts in any way with this podcast is equally valued and welcome. I'm grateful to everyone who wants to spend their time here. I love the interaction that comes with it. And everyone has equality of speech, I hope. So if I say something that is upsetting or comes across in a way where its impact is hurtful, please do call me out on it. Normal rules apply. We'll be polite to each other, we'll be civilised, we'll be respectful. But if I'm sitting here being an idiot, please call me out on it. Explain to me where I've gone wrong. I will happily listen. I will apologise where I've gone wrong, and I will try to learn from it. And I know it's not your job to teach me, but I am very grateful for any instruction that I get. We don't know where this debate is going to go. Ultimately, this is a knitting, crafting podcast, so that will be the focus of the stuff that I put up here. But this is something that's affecting our community. So if it's something where the conversation needs to be carried on, I will. But I'm not looking to turn this into a podcast about racism. I feel hopelessly underqualified. Doesn't matter what I'm reading. We've got to keep this conversation going because we can't pretend it isn't happening. Right, lovely people, I've put a light behind the camera, which is making me look a little bit shiny and may put a bit of glare on the glasses, but we'll see how we go. I have got 2 finished objects. It's finished object central around here this week, and some yarn acquisition. So I'll come to that in a moment. I haven't bought it, but I have kindly been given it. I have finished the last of the fluffy blankets. This is the biggest, the most colourful, the scrappiest, as you can see. So this is using up every last bit of novelty yarn in my stash. So having made the 2 blankets for my great niece and great nephew, we decided they were quite cosy. So I've got one now. All sorts of stuff in here. Some of this in the middle is more of a kind of snowflakey sort of yarn. If it's finer weight, I used it double. A lot of this stuff is chunky or bulky weight. So I did it all with a 6mm crochet hook. It's a bog standard granny square, same as I did for Fern. We've got all sorts of fluff in here. This is the Crafts feathers. This is the ruffled ribbon. This is some Brazilia. It's a German make that I think is now part of Regia. I don't even know if the yarn's still available. But it's quite large. It's kind of almost wingspan. And very thick and cosy. Now, as is the law of these things, I finished this blanket. I put it to one side. I started tidying up some yarns. I sorted out some of the kits that I'd had through from a magazine, which is where some of these yarns had come from. And what should be there but some fluffy eyelash type of yarn. And I sort of thought, oh, I'll just finish that. And then I also thought, this yarn is for a toy. I thought, this is the colour of metallic diarrhea. I don't want that on the edge of my blanket. So I'm sorry to say that has gone, well, into the bin, frankly, because it was fairly rank. I suppose I could have used it for, I should have used it for twiddle muffs. Apologies, that was wasteful of me. But I didn't want that kind of horrible yucky brown on the edge of this lovely blue and black. So we are done with that. First of my finished objects. The second, you'll be delighted to know, is not another blanket. We are done with the blankets for now. I have just dropped my pattern. And this is a cowl. And the pattern is Artemis Cowl by Schachenmayr Designs, otherwise known as Jen McVicker. My mate Mandy, who has featured in the Not Quite About Yarn podcast that I've done, and she was involved in Vlogmas as well, rang me up, and bless her, she doesn't knit, but she watches the podcast. She does tend to skip over the complicated knitting bits, so that's fair enough. And she said, that cowl thing you were wearing, and that would have been my joyful cowl that I made this time last year. She said I could do with one of those, or something similar. So she asked for it in blues, and this is it. It takes one skein of yarn, and this yarn is Manos de Uruguay Silk Blend in the, I think it's the Atlanta colourway. Nice and soft, it's a silk blend as it suggests. I'll put the details on screen. So it feels quite nice. I blocked it, I didn't block it too much kind of that way. I just blocked it that way over some boxes. Just to give it a nice sort of drape. So hopefully you can see the pattern. It's quite a simple diamond lace pattern. Very easy to read actually. Once, if you've done much lace, or even if you haven't done a lot of lace, once you've done a few rows you can kind of see where you're headed with it. That's not to say I didn't make any mistakes, because of course I did. I am but human. But it's a straightforward pattern and quite a nice one to follow. So I did it fairly quickly, turned that round in a few evenings. Yeah, so Manos Silk Blend, the Artemis Cowl pattern, and there it be. So I hope she likes it. It feels quite nice and soft, so I'm hoping she likes it. And now for my stash acquisition. I have a friend called Lou, who is a celebrant, and just before Christmas she said to me that her mum was very poorly. They thought that her mum was not going to be here for very long, and would I take the funeral when she died. And of course, honoured, privilege, no question. Her mum died just before Christmas, and the funeral was just after the New Year. I said I wouldn't charge a fee. She said, oh, you must. I said, no, I'm not going to. And in the end she said, well, I'll buy you some yarn. So I said, thank you very much. She then said, I've no idea about yarn, but she told me of a yarn shop that's close to where she was staying. She was staying at a family. And I had a look on their website. And where I've not been buying yarn, there have been some that I would like to try to see what they're like, but haven't got any because I haven't been buying yarn. And this particular shop did Sheeps's Whirl. Hoping that will focus if I take my head out of it. I hope so. So I said, oh, some of that would be lovely, thank you. And bless her, she got me 4 balls of it. She's so generous. I mean, it's just so kind. This stuff has, I mean, these cakes are sort of, it says on here 215 to 225 grams, 1,000 metres. So already in my stash this year I have acquired 4,000 metres. I don't even walk 4,000 metres most days. But anyway, so I have 4 balls of Sheeps's Whirl. and I'm delighted. I had no idea, apart from knowing what the colours were like, I had no idea about it. It's, where's the blend? 60% cotton, 40% acrylic, and it feels really nice. This is in the Blueberry Bam Bam colourway. So I've got 4, all the same, and I look forward to making something. But possibly not yet, because the 2 projects I have just shown you are the first 2 things I've made this year which would be eligible for the knit along. This is the Stash Cow 2019 Stash Cow, I'll put it on the screen, being co-hosted by the wonderful Barbara of the Flame and Fibre podcast and me. I will put a link to, which side? It'll be a little eye linking to the bonus episode where I set out the rules and the logistics of the craft, crochet, knit, weave, spin along that we're hosting. And the idea is to make things from stash. It's got running all year, and very basically to enter, the stash has got to have been in your stash by the end of last year, and the project has to be started 1st of January or later. So the previous 2 blankets I'd made for the kids I'd started before the new year, but the new one and the cowl I have made during 2019, so they would be eligible. Obviously I'm not entering my own crochet along or knit along, that would be a little odd, but they would be eligible. So I hope that you're interested in joining in. Anything you knit that meets those criteria, stick it in the FO thread on the Ravelry page, and you can double dip, so in the Not Quite Enough Yarn group, but also in Barbara's Flame and Fibre podcast group. And I hope you've been going along to see Barbara. You probably have seen her podcast anyway, because she's wonderful. But if you haven't, go and check her out and join her group and enter there, because we're double dipping on prizes. It's positively encouraged. More later. Well, I said I would show you what I was doing. Hello. With the bit of yarn I had left over from that cowl, and then completely forgot. So I shall show you now. Ably assisted by my not very interested dog. You gonna say hello? No, okay then. I've decided to take my double knitting weight scraps and turn them into a project. I think I printed off the pattern at the last podcast, and I have now started my northeasterly blanket. And here is the bit of yarn I had left over from the cowl. These are other project leftovers, mainly from the entrelac jacket that I wear, I think. I think that's where most of these colours come from, and this was some I'd made a scarf from. But yes, so this is going to be a very long in the making project, because I'm just going to add bits to it as I go. I'm not at all worried about uniform lengths of stripes, as you can see, because from the needle down to there is one stripe, there's the next, halfway through this is the next, because we've got 2 lots of blue here, so that's a stripe, another one, and then this purple down at the bottom. So it will be a very, very scrappy blanket, and none the worse for all that. So it is something that's just going to be on the needles probably for years, until I decide what length I want to make, what width I want to make, and finish it off. But for the moment, that's as far as I've got, and bits will get added to it as I have them. So yes, the Northeasterly by Skenanigans, which a lot of podcasters I think have been making. Certainly I saw it thanks to Shauna from Shauna Stitches, who last I saw was test knitting a variant of this with lots of texture in the stripes. So there was some brioche and some lace work. I'm going to stick to the original, fairly vanilla garter stitch. I like the way that looks. I think that's going to work for this blanket. And it also saves it being too complicated. If it's something I'm going to put down and go back to weeks or months apart, depending on what scraps I've got to work with, then the simpler pattern the better. So that's that. Right, we're getting close to the hour, and I try not to go above an hour if I can help it. So I'm going to bring things to a close here. I hope my rant in the middle wasn't too ranty, too rambling, or too long, but it's such an important subject. I don't think we can try and summarise it too much. But back to knitting and crocheting and stuff. Things in the pipeline. I'd said at the end of the last podcast that my next garment would be crochet. I had done a lot of knitting at that point. Of course, that was before I thought about sitting down and crocheting blankets. But anyway, and this is a book I've had for a while. So this is Top Down Crochet Sweaters by Dora Orenstein. And there's one in here that I have just started swatching for. And if I was a professional, I'd have had it bookmarked. But you don't come here for professionalism. You come here for whatever this is. Oh, I really can't find it. Oh, that's embarrassing. I could use the index. That whole using books things. Anyway, this is the pattern here. It's what this blonde-haired lady is wearing. It's called Janelle. So it's crocheted in sport weight yarn, and it's an open-fronted, sort of loose open crochet cardigan with linked crochet stitches. And it's the first time I've done those. I tried them just to see what they were like, but it's the first time I've done them in a garment, so I'm looking forward to how that's going to work. I'm going to go completely off-brand with this one actually, because I think, don't hold me to this, but I think I have enough yarn for the whole garment. I know! I don't know how that happened. I have some very sort of muted Noro Silk Garden sock, I think it is, and it's in sort of beige, browns and greys, and it's sock weight, and I think I have enough meterage, so I will have quite enough yarn. Might have to change the name of the podcast when I finish that item and tell you all about it. But anyway, that's the next garment I'm making. I'm also making a baby sleep sack. I need to get that started because the baby will be due certainly by the time the next podcast goes up. So that's something else that I'm going to get on the needles hopefully this weekend, as this podcast is loading up to YouTube. Thank you as always for watching, for putting up with my nonsense, for commenting, for being part of this little community within the larger community, and I am so grateful for all of your comments, all of your input, all of your suggestions and ideas. Hope you have a great month. If you're entering the knit along, I look forward to seeing the finished objects and your chatter on Ravelry. And when I say knit along, I do mean knit along, crochet along, spin along, anything along. So good luck if you're taking part. Hope you enjoy shopping from Stash. It's something I really like, just as well. but no, it's something I really like. The other thing that is quite exciting for me, and again going off brand, before the end of the next month, so before next month's podcast is going up, I'm going to a yarn show. I bought my ticket today for Unravel, which is in Surrey, southwest-ish of London, and I'm going on the Friday. So if you're there on the Friday, please do say hello to me if you'd like to, because I would be delighted to meet you. I should warn you now, I'm quite a hugger. So yes, and I'm afraid this is what you get in real life as well, so it's up to you if you approach me or not. But no, if anyone is there on the Friday at Unravel, it will be lovely to see you. And this is the splurge splurge of yarn shopping that I'm allowing myself this year. I'm so excited. I made the mistake, I'm not sure it was a mistake, I had a look at the vendor list, and I think it was a bit of a mistake because I want to buy all the things. I just do. I'm getting very excited about it. Also, I'm going with a lady from our knitting group, and from what she said, I don't think she's been to a yarn show before. So the two of us are going to be like children on sugar in a sweet shop. It is going to be a lot of fun, I hope, and we're going to be so excited. There'll be tears before bedtime, I'm sure, but no, so I'm very much looking forward to that. Yeah, that's it for the month. Have a good February, everyone. Hope wherever you are the weather is livable. I know some people are suffering with extreme heat as I record this. In Australia, temperatures are high up in the 40s Celsius, which makes me uncomfortable just thinking about it. I know in other parts of the world, a lot of bad snow and a lot of danger. So please stay safe wherever you are. I hope that you have time to knit. I hope that it brings you joy. And again, when I say knit, I mean crochet or all the things. I hope whatever you're crafting brings you joy. Thank you so much for watching. See you again soon. Take good care.